Um, my name is Megan, and I am a sex worker. I am also an artist, a gerontologist, and creator of women's empowerment experiences. Generally, when I tell people what I do and I say I'm a stripper, a reaction I often get is, well, you don't look like a stripper. And I always respond to that with, well, what does a stripper look like? When we generally think of a sex worker, our minds automatically go to a woman who has large breasts, large lips, and a sexually evocative look. And I think it's important that we begin to think about, where did we get this idea of what a sex worker looks like? And how does this idea of what a sex worker looks like influence our perceptions of women who are sex workers and women generally? When you think of a woman who capitalizes on her sexuality to make money, what comes to mind? And where do you get those ideas? It's really important that we unlearn the myths that bind us. Recently, a photo that I posted at a sex worker advocacy pop-up back in March before New York shut down was reposted by two feminist Instagram accounts. And I want to share the photo with you as I read to you some of the comments that I received. So these are feminist accounts. They both have 30,000 and 300,000 followers respectively. The comments people wrote here articulate many of our culturally held beliefs around sex work. Some of the comments said, sex work means capitalist exploitation and oppression. It's actually just more objectification of women. Shame on a feminist page for posting this. Doing this means you have nothing to contribute to society, no talents, no passions, no abilities, no morals, no shame, and do not care about your future. There are a million crimes associated with it. It is not safe, and it is another way for society to exploit women. You are renting your orifices, and there's zero glamour, dignity, or respect in that. This photo was reposted again, and the second feminist account had to ban the comments and the comment section because the comments became so licentious and negative. So I want to deconstruct the myths that surround these comments, and hopefully the deconstruction of this will bring us to the larger issue, which involves how we generally view women's bodies, and where these beliefs originated from, and how we perpetuate them, and how we can stop. So it might feel really crazy to go back 3,000 years to explain this. But I want to explain something else in the context of historical time, so we can see how our current day is very influenced by things that happened thousands of years ago. So how did we get to think of this as the year 2020, 2020? Our current calendar system began back in 45 BCE. There were ways of organizing time before that, but our current system relies upon the Roman calendar, which evolved into the Greek calendar, which evolved into a Christian-based calendar. So this is an easy way to see how something today started way back 2020 years ago. So it might not seem like a far stretch then to think about how other parts of modern life have been impacted by history. So I want to go ahead and say that this is by no means representative of all of the things that have happened throughout history that impact how we see women, but it's specific, and it specifically addresses how we see women and their sexuality, and it has huge implications for how we see women generally. 3,000 years ago, the Assyrian ruling class enacted a piece of legislation that still profoundly impacts women today. During the second millennium BC, we transitioned from an agrarian society to what we now live in, the city-state. Prostitution came about during this time not as the world's oldest profession, but from the enslavement of women through military conquest, and also from the pauperization of farmers who would ultimately have to sell their wives and daughters to pay off their debts. With this emergence of prostitution, it became important for the sexual lives of women of the ruling class to be regulated or sanctioned to distinguish them from the women who were enslaved and thusly okay to rape. Their sexuality also yielded its own kind of profit. Their goodness from not being raped and enslaved made them have another sanctioned form of commodity, virginity. To distinguish visibly the women who were sexually available and those who were not, Middle Assyrian law number 40 drew a line between women. With the commodification of their sexuality and reproductivity, women had been disconnected from their own desires and from a sense of their own human dignity. The women who wore face coverings were respected women and thusly the ones you couldn't rape. And the women who had their faces not covered were women who were prostitutes and slaves. So the division of women into respectable women who are protected by their men and disreputable women who are out on the street unprotected by men and free to sell their services has been the basic class division for women. And we can see this today in 2020 when we sanction virginity as something that makes a woman good or something that makes a woman a slut. We see this today when we stigmatize sex work. We still do this today when we see a sexually liberated woman and we judge her. And so it's important to see how something that happened 3,000 years ago can carry on today. And I want to tie it into what's going on in the world and current events. In her book, At the Root of This Longing by Carol Lee Flinders, it's an amazing book. She writes that sexism undergirds all other isms. If we can take 1/2 of every population cross-culturally across the world and make them less than, we can take that and make everybody else less than. So all isms come from sexism. If we can take one entire gender and make them less, it's so much easier to do that with people of different religions, of different cultures, of different races. And so I think it's really important that we think about how we actively take ideas that have created patriarchy over centuries and have influenced how we see women today.